All right, so welcome everyone to the February webinar for the Ohio Workforce Coalition. This is a particularly exciting session for me because I don't know that I've actually ever been the presenter on one of our webinars. I always like to connect you with other resources and experts, but this is my chance to share a bit more about our work. Today we're going to be talking about our policy priorities and what they will mean for an inclusive economic recovery. Jason, you want to kick us off? All right, so I imagine by now most everyone is up to speed on Zoom etiquette, so I won't belabor those points, but I do want to say you're welcome to use your video or not, whatever you're most comfortable with. And we do ask that you stay muted, but please use the chat. We hope that we're able to engage, get questions answered, get input and whatnot. I want to take a moment and go ahead and introduce or ask them to introduce themselves. A few members of our leadership committee who are joining us today, and ask them to introduce themselves, their organizational affiliation, and the length of their engagement with the coalition. So let's see, Lori, could you go ahead and kick that off?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Atkins, and I am with the Literacy Cooperative. We are in Cleveland, Ohio. We advocate for advancing literacy for adults and children in our community through different types of initiatives. I am also part of the Ohio Workforce Coalition, and I'm on the Leadership Committee. And the Literacy Cooperative has been involved with OWC since its inception. So glad to be here, and I welcome all of you.
Thank you. Tony. Or
Awesome.
Carrie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Great. My name is Tony Cunningham, and I am in the great city of Columbus, Ohio. I'm with Perscolis Columbus. Perscolis is a national nonprofit who focuses on training and support for individuals who would like to launch technology careers. So I have been a part of the OWC and the Leadership Committee for about 3 months now, I think. And just looking forward to digging into this work and happy to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Carrie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carrie Cart. I'm with Great Lakes Community Action Partnership in Northwest Ohio. However, we do have staff across the great state of Ohio. Thank you all for joining us. This is very exciting for the Workforce Coalition, which I've been a member also since its inception, and we're excited to be able to showcase our new policy platform.
Thanks, Carrie. I think we've also got Rob and John on the call. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, everybody. My name is Rob Genter. I'm the Workforce Director in Area 16, which is a rural part of Ohio covering Belmont, Jefferson, Harrison, and Carroll counties. I also serve on the board of the Ohio Workforce Association, and I'm involved with the Ohio Workforce Coalition to bring more of a rural perspective to the work that's being done.
Thanks, Rob. And John.
Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. I'm talking to you from Columbus, Ohio. I, like Rob, am an executive director of a workforce board. There's 20 of them in Ohio. I'm the part of the Greater Ohio Workforce Board. It's a large region that covers most of Western Ohio and some of Southern Ohio, all the way up around Toledo, all the way down towards Cincinnati. Rob and I and our colleagues run the Ohio Means Job Centers, of which many of you are partners. I can see Casey on here. It's good to see a friendly face from one of our job centers. Excited to have you here and excited to be part of this. I'm on the leadership group as a very new attendee, just like Tony. I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to partner with all of you.
Thanks, John. So as we're going throughout today, feel free to chat any questions you have to those members of our leadership team, and then they can certainly weigh in as we get to the discussion portion of our agenda. So all of you participants, like I mentioned, we'd like this to be really interactive. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat, your organization, and then, it'd be great to hear one thing that you're really hoping to learn from this meeting, and we'll certainly cover as much as we can. As far as the meeting, today we're really hoping to accomplish 4 different things. The official announcement of the coalition's policy priorities, ways that you can engage in helping to advance those priorities, a high-level summary of some of the items that we're watching and that are being watched by Advocates for Ohio's Future in the state budget, an update on some federal advocacy that happened this week, and then again, making sure that we've got plenty of time for Q&A. So as you can tell, that is a packed agenda. I speak quickly, even if it isn't a packed agenda. So please feel free to slow me down or ask me to clarify anything. We are recording, so you will be able to go back and revisit this session when it's posted on our website. And we will also certainly be able to share more detail as time goes on. All right, next slide. So as you're introducing yourself, we're going to do a quick poll and get a better sense for who all is on the call. Where are you joining us from? What type of area is that? And I can't remember. Oh, what type of organization? So go ahead. We'll give you just about 30 seconds to do that. All right. Look at the Northeast Ohio representing strong. We got to do some work down in that southeast portion of the state. Lots of urban representation. Where are my adult education friends? Interesting. All right. Let's see. So hopefully you all can share those results. So most of our participants are, or you can see the results rather, most of the participants are from Northeast Ohio, but Jason, why don't you go on to the next slide. As you can see from the poll, the coalition has engagement from across Ohio, across a wide range of organizations and a variety of perspectives about workforce and talent in Ohio. Since launch in 2007, our work has really been focused on each part of workforce ecosystem: individual Ohioans, Ohio employers, and the Ohio workforce system. We have 2 primary streams of work. The first being really focused on networks, building, supporting, and engaging a network of professionals, that would be all of you, who are invested and interested in workforce education and training. Our second strategy is very focused on identifying policy recommendations, solutions to challenges that emerge, and then being able to educate and advocate with public officials so that we can advance those policy recommendations. I do want to just be clear, because I used two terms, I guess, that I want to make sure we're all on the same page about. So when we talk about public policy, it certainly includes the work of the General Assembly, but we're also talking about the executive agencies, rulemaking, interpretation of federal guidance, technical assistance to local areas, and so on. And so our work may include a lot of legislative activity and meeting with local elected officials, but might also include more technical meeting with state agencies or other leadership. So we hope to engage all of you in parts of both of those, but just want to make sure it's clear that we're speaking very broadly. And then when we talk about workforce systems, the coalition really sees workforce systems as really workforce functioning at the intersection of multiple other systems and institutions. So imagine, if you will, the community college system or the community action system or the public workforce system. Each of those contributes and is a core part of the workforce ecosystem in Ohio, but also works on a lot of other things. So we like to talk about our work as supporting all of these other systems that are invested in workforce. Next slide, please. So traditionally, the coalition's platforms have been very broad and very deep. An example of that would be kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of the Ohio College Opportunity Grant or state share of instruction and whatnot. And since those days, since our last real formal policy agenda, there has been a significant growth in the number of entities that are looking at workforce, considering workforce-related policies, and there's a lot of expertise that exists that that expertise is advancing workforce interests from a number of different perspectives. Examples of that include the work of Advocates for Ohio's Future, and we'll hear from their director a little bit later. They've really organized human service advocates to address issues across the board, but talking about SNAP employment and training and Medicaid work requirements. There's Ohio Excels that's released reports and has had conferences about post-secondary completion. And certainly, as John mentioned, the WIOA directors are organized now more formally and working to advance around WIOA issues. So the Ohio Workforce Coalition's Leadership Committee really saw this as an opportunity to identify areas where the coalition is uniquely positioned to lead on specific issues that will encourage Ohio to grow and innovate and really evolve into the future of workforce and talent. It leaves us opportunity to have more partners and even to support efforts that may not be squarely in our wheelhouse, but are certainly relevant to the world of work. So you'll see in our most recent priorities that we are still focusing on individuals, employers, and the system, but that we, to some extent, have gone big and are looking forward to these big picture recommendations really having an impact on workforce in Ohio. So another poll to get a better sense of the engagement that you all have currently in the public policy space, at either educating officials or advocating around issues. Like to hear how much time you spend doing this sort of work and what level of interest you really have. Okay. I love seeing that volunteer active community member participation. Wonderful. Looks like a lot of you are juggling multiple responsibilities, have policy or educating public officials as a portion of your job. But a lot of interest, it looks like, in continuing to increase engagement, which is exciting, of course, for us, because that means more help and support to get things done. All right, you want to close the poll and share it, Jason? Okay, so for most of our participants, looks like about a little under half. It's some of the work that you do. So certainly the coalition can plug in to support that or offer you other opportunities. Glad to see the interest and willingness to engage. And then fascinating that there is a lot of interest in the system. So hopefully we'll be speaking your language here. All right, so let's dig in then. Jason, next slide. All right, so as I mentioned, we are focusing on individuals, individuals, employers, and systems. Many of Ohio's low-income families are working but still not getting by. Ohio has made important investments in business services, training, and employment services. And now the coalition would really like to see those sorts of directed and flexible investments made in Ohioans who are taking advantage of training and other sorts of supports. Next slide. So the coalition is recommending the creation of a flexible training fund or flexible training, employment, and job retention fund for Ohioans who are under 300% of poverty and still need the supports that come with being able to get through school. So whether it is some extra transportation support or childcare support they might not be eligible for through other funding streams, we really want to make sure that investments in education and training are well spent because people can actually finish those. We are recommending that this fund be created by reserving 10% of the general revenue funds that are currently proposed for sector partnerships. And this is specifically, again, to make sure that individuals, regardless of which sector, are able to successfully get through training, secure employment, and move up, no matter what. Next slide. All right, so as far as employers go, the notion of quality employment has been emerging nationally for the past several years. I do want to be clear that it's certainly not just about wages. Wages are an important part of a quality job, but certainly not the whole part of a quality job framework. The coalition believes that priority should be given to businesses that are really advancing their workforce, investing in it, and paying attention to components of job quality like safety protocols, predictable scheduling, benefits like healthcare coverage or tuition reimbursement. Next slide. So we are recommending the creation of an Ohio Premier Employer designation that employers across the state, whether they are private employers, public sector employers, and so on, can opt into and earn. The idea is that designation will give employers sort of a thumbs up from a quality job perspective, and then help attract talent. We believe that there is a lot of public investment available and philanthropic investment, and that these investments ought to go to employers who are doing their part to offer good jobs. Certainly recognize that The devil's in the detail with this sort of recommendation. There are tools out there. Aspen Institute has a tool that can assess and benchmark quality workplaces with a racial equity lens. And that tool has actually been used by a major hospital system in Cincinnati. So we are confident that we can pull this off, and we look forward to working with a variety of partners to develop this sort of designation. Next slide. All right. Priority 3, strengthening systems. And as I noted earlier, this is where there's a lot of energy. So 10 years ago, under the Kasich administration, there were significant changes to Ohio's workforce and economic development landscape. There was legislation and executive orders that created Jobs Ohio and Ohio's Office of Workforce Transformation. Throughout these 10 years, there has been a lot of work done. There have been surveys, programs launched, programs ended, reports issued, and a significant amount of talent and HR support offered to businesses who are locating, growing, relocating in Ohio. And much of this work has happened with targeted engagement of specific individuals or groups. And the coalition really sees an opportunity to continue and ensure stakeholder input and engagement across the state. And as I mentioned earlier, 10 years ago, the coalition was one of only a few voices in the workforce space. Today, there are many, and we really want to make sure that as strategies are being set, that we're engaging all of them. Next slide. So for here, we are recommending that, we sort of take stock. We look at the work that has been accomplished over the last 10 years and outline which initiatives of these offices have worked, where we see strong impacts on employers, and how we might continue to foster stakeholder engagement and look towards data accountability and transparency and relationship building across the state. Next slide. All right, so as I mentioned on the outset, we have a lead partner support framework. In addition to what these 3 priorities where the coalition plans to lead, we also do plan to partner with initiatives or efforts across the state to support work that's happening. So the coalition is going to be partnering with Advocates for Ohio's Future to really follow their lead on broadband access and addressing the digital divide. We plan to partner with Business Leaders United, which is a statewide initiative focused on engaging businesses in workforce advocacy to follow their lead on increasing the number of work-based learning opportunities. And then we intend to reach out to all interested advocacy groups, really to engage in a discussion about the issues created by Ohio's benefit cliff, that the impact of the cliff, and I hear we're calling it the bridge. The impact is significant across multiple agencies and certainly influences individuals' career paths and trajectory. So looking at, from a systems perspective, what we may do to address the cliff. So I want to pause and just ask if there's any questions that, I imagine there are questions, but anything that you want to ask as far as clarification. I'm going to talk more about how you can engage and ways that we're going to offer opportunities to go deeper into any of these, but anyone want to jump in?
Rebecca, I have a question.
Sure.
Hi, this is Kathy Belk. My question was about priority number 3 that OWC is going to be leading on. Is there an outcome of that work that you're anticipating? Is it a report and then, or something else? And then what would we do with that? Or what would OWC do with it?
Sure. So not a report in an assessment or evaluative sort of way, more of a sort of acknowledging everything, report acknowledging what's been done and creating a tool to be able to share that. There is a lot of data. Both Jobs Ohio and the Office of Workforce Transformation issue regular annual reports. I mean, there's a lot of information out there. I think what we're interested in is making sure that local stakeholders have an opportunity to see how that work has impacted their communities. And we also are interested in seeing whether or not what we said or what we thought was going to happen, for example, by aligning or creating the Office of Workforce Transformation, whether it actually did that. And I think, there's definitely ways to both celebrate the progress that we've made. I mean, there are states that are still grappling with how to focus on the state level at workforce. The goal would be to say, okay, yes, we've made some great progress. Here's where we can continue to advance. So I see some other questions. Okay, so I think the reference to Business Leaders United, I saw a couple times. Business Leaders United is an initiative of the National Skills Coalition. It is brand new in the state of Ohio. If you're interested in more information on them, I can certainly connect you to some of the folks championing that. They're still very early in developing their own policy agenda, but they are, again, business focused, chamber led, and brand new to Ohio. I think that answers the, let's see, is the policy focus on a return to normal or continuing to encourage policy changes that have occurred in COVID? So that's a great point. I don't think, well, I'm not sure that there is going to be really a return to normal. I don't know that we know what normal is anymore. There has been a lot of learning that's happened because it had to happen over the course of the last year. So from a workforce perspective, we're talking about investments and acknowledgement of the innovations that have happened, to the point of to Benjamin's point, keeping participants in the workforce by shifting from incarceration to home diversion. That's something we want to say, yes, let's do more of that specifically because of COVID, but hey, it worked, let's maintain it. And that is definitely something we hear about or that we want to encourage relative to workforce programming. Over the last 2 decades, workforce funding has dropped, I think, by about 40%. And so we, of course, want to see investments specifically to mitigate the impacts of COVID and the resulting economic hardship. But we're in it for the long game. This isn't just about COVID recovery. This is about how do we make sure that we've got a long-term strategy for Ohio. What steps have been taken to direct training toward the WIOA priorities, training other than getting to work? So we are not focused specifically on a training recommendation or mapping to the WIOA priorities. The work of the Directors Association and that, their priorities, I think we would follow their lead and look for input from them. The coalition right now is really trying to kind of stay in our lane and support the work of other efforts across the state. And certainly WIOA is a key component of the workforce system. And, I have talked to Jennifer Meekiels, the chair, the current chair, and, we'll continue to do so. So certainly want to have a close connection to them, but we are not articulating direct work relative to WIOA. Now at the federal level, that might be different, but as far as our state agenda. So I, just in the interest of time, want to go ahead and move this forward. So could you go ahead to the next slide? So this is our last poll. So you just got a really high level, really probably quick overview of our priorities, and want to just get sort of the knee-jerk reaction. What do you think? I'm expecting a whole variety of responses. So please be open, be transparent, be honest, and looking forward to hearing what you think just after these first few minutes. All right, it's getting a lot of support. Appreciate that. And some interest in engaging to advance them, and that's great. Again, just after this high level overview, so certainly appreciate that. You want to close the poll and share the results, Jason? All right, so it looks like from an overall perspective, certainly a majority of folks being somewhat or very supportive, and then somewhat are very likely to actually engage in helping to advance these priorities. So appreciate that support, and we will certainly be tapping into the network. All right. So that's, concludes really the broad overview of the coalition's priorities. We will be releasing the narrative document here imminently, and along with that, several opportunities for you to engage with the coalition. The first thing that we're doing, we will be offering listening sessions. So, as you know, that was a really high level overview. There's probably a multitude of questions, and we certainly have a lot more detail as to what led us to these particular recommendations. So throughout March, there will be listening sessions. We'll send the dates and times out with the follow-up. And these will be opportunities for you to weigh in, ask questions, share your perspective on each of the priority areas. Secondly, actually, I think we skipped a slide. Could you go back one slide? No. Oh, so I skipped this. I apologize. So secondly, there are opportunities to endorse the platform or the priorities. We have historically accepted endorsements from individuals and organizations. So we will send that link. Certainly encourage you to endorse. It helps as we're having legislative and really any sort of visit to be able to say we have support of X number of organizations and Y number of people. And then there will be committees that will focus on each of the priorities, and joining that committee, that could be work anywhere from helping to gather constituent stories to meeting with your elected officials in district, or helping to engage peers or other stakeholders. And so again, we'll circulate that link with the follow-up materials. All right, now we can keep going forward. There we go. So as I mentioned, that kind of wraps up the coalition priorities overview. We will share these next couple updates relatively quickly. Just wanted to let everyone know, if you participated in last month's webinar, that we talked about our visits with Ohio's federal delegation. Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, members of the coalition met with 10 members of Ohio's federal delegation. We met primarily with staff, which is what typically happens. There was a lot of mention of career pathways, which, I got to tell you, 10 years ago when you met with staff about workforce, they didn't have that language. And so we've come a long way relative to advancements around workforce advocacy. There's a lot of interest in apprenticeship, and also interest in help to continue to engage in the district. So COVID really, I think, has limited their constituent connections. And I think there's a great opportunity for the coalition to help there. Next slide. And then we said that we would share some key budget updates. I'm going to say just a couple things about what we're watching from a strictly workforce perspective, and then turn it over to Kelsey Bergfeld to share a bit more about what Advocates for Ohio's Future is watching. So from the executive's proposed budget, sector partnerships are maintained for the next biennium at the same funding level, which is $2.5 million a year. This is the fund that we're recommending the job retention or job employment and job retention fund be created out of, which would still leave $4.5 million directly for sector partnerships. There is ongoing funding for Tech Cred and IMAP, which is the individual micro-credential program. And that funding is, there's also an expansion of that funding with recovery, economic recovery money. There's also creation of a economically distressed communities fund. I think that's really early. There's more work to do on that. And Kelsey, if you want to share more there, please do. And then many of you will recall that there's been an ongoing interest in investing in making sure that high school students can earn industry recognized credentials while they're in high school. And so that funding is turning back up in the proposed budget. So Kelsey, let me turn it over to you and have you share any other budget specific updates.
Certainly. Well, Rebecca, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity and the time this afternoon to talk to you a little bit about Advocates for Ohio's Future and some of the issues that we are looking at and diving into in the state budget. As many of you know, the state budget is a very, very long process. We first saw it introduced in February the first day of February this year, and then it will not be finished or wrapped up until the very end of June. So right now we are talking about what is in the governor's proposed budget. This proposal will go through about 6 or 7 full rounds of amendments and changes before the final product is voted on this summer. So to what Rebecca was really introducing and speaking to is just what the governor thinks is a good idea for the state. We know the House will have their first turn at amendments and making those changes about mid-March is when we'll see their first round of changes. They get a second round. And then the Senate will start to pick some things apart. So it's always a fun process here at the state every other year. So Advocates for Ohio's Future, if you're not familiar with us, I'm the director, and we serve as the Health and Human Services kind of state policy table. We have a really wide range of members who focus on everything from affordable healthcare to food security, affordable and safe housing, services for older adults, early childhood care and education, as well as services for Ohioans with disabilities. We really run the gamut in terms of policy, but we are united in the mission to make sure that our vulnerable Ohioans have the supports that they need to live really successful lives. And at its root is making sure that those folks have opportunity. So really enjoyed working with Rebecca and with Carrie and a few others on the call to make sure that we understand that these sectors intersect and how we can work together to move forward on these priorities. So just really our kind of overview of the budget kind of top lines, given the environment that we're in and the opportunities that this budget could have afforded, my members and I kind of did our initial analysis, and it's a budget. There's really no glaring issues or kind of problems that we have honed in on to really sound the alarms. Again, something interesting that we found is that the governor is not tapping into the $2.7 billion rainy day fund to help with some response and recovery from the pandemic. We find that interesting. We also found that the K-12 funding system is not addressed in this budget, so that may come later. We know the House is starting hearings on an independent bill through that process. Another really kind of focus that Advocates for Ohio's Future has taken in the past months and the past year is making sure that folks have access to broadband, not only access and making sure the infrastructure is there for all communities and Ohioans, but making sure that it's affordable for folks. And unfortunately, that second part is part of the conversation we feel has been lacking at the state level. There has been great movement on some bills to fund some infrastructure and access projects in the state. We have both House Bill 2 that was passed by the Ohio House last week. We have Senate Bill 8 that was also passed by the Senate. So now they're swapping chambers with these investments. And the governor has also proposed, he had about $290 million investment for broadband access. In his proposed budget, $150 million of that has been moved to House Bill 2. So we are, I know it's a lot of kind of, you need like a flow chart to track where all these changes are happening, but we are keeping our eye on these investments, making sure that really they are reaching those not only in our rural areas where access is certainly an issue, but not taking those kind of urban areas where maybe infrastructure has not been updated or really affordable for folks into their decisions when they make these investments. So that's something that Advocates for Ohio's Future is working on and tracking. A couple other issues I also wanted to bring to this group's attention. So we know that access to affordable childcare is also a really important work support when we talk about getting folks back to work under these, well, at any time, but certainly under these circumstances. I wanted to tell you that the executive budget proposal proposes raising the income requirements for publicly funded childcare from 130% of the federal poverty level up to 138% of the federal poverty level. So a little bit of a jump, and then increasing that to 150% of the federal poverty level for special needs children. So that is encouraging news. Advocates for Ohio's Future, really our policy platform is 200% of the federal poverty level for all kids. But we know that issues of capacity are prevalent around the state, and we want to make sure that our childcare workers have what they need to be protected during this pandemic, and also making sure that we are paying them accordingly. We know they do incredible work, and we know their wages do not reflect that as this time. I also wanted to quickly highlight some of the other issues that we are keeping an eye on. We know that federal dollars are a big part of our budget. Also makes it a little bit difficult to think about projections in terms of how much federal funding we'll see and what the timing of that will be, and if there will be new buckets and new pots coming from the federal government as Congress is debating a new proposal as we speak. So there was a $700 million investment from the federal government into rent assistance and mortgage relief. So something that's interesting that's happening in the budget is they released $100 million of that to our community action agencies to really target those individuals and families who need that immediate support now. However, the other kind of $450 million is being, I don't want to say held hostage, that's a little bit of an intense term, but it is. In the budget, which means that those dollars can't go out to communities until at least late this summer. And we know that those communities and a lot of folks and families need that help now. So we are working with leaders in the House and Senate to make sure that those dollars how we can move those dollars maybe into a separate bill to get them to families as soon as possible, to make sure that they really make a difference and provide some stability for those families who are struggling and have been hit the hardest by COVID. So Rebecca, that is really my kind of top line issues that I wanted to share with the group today. Open to any questions or any questions in the chat that you'd like to bring to my attention. Fire away.
Thanks, Kelsey. And as you can tell, Kelsey goes deep into the budget, and I'm thrilled that she was able to be with us today. And that really concludes sort of the formal presentation part of today's agenda. And again, would now welcome questions, comments, feedback. I think there's some great ones in the chat as far as kind of where we're headed. I do want to remind everyone that there will be a narrative released that offers more detail on some of these. There's only so much time in an hour, or so much we can cover in an hour. So please keep your eyes open for other more detail. But questions? Okay. I don't know. It's hard to tell if that means we were so thorough or we were just too quick. I'm going to scroll one more time through the chat. I did respond to the question about President Biden's executive order to rescind IRAPs, mentioning that it came up in some of the conversations yesterday, specifically with Representative Joyce's office. I think, there certainly is concern about just wholesale rescission, but lots of ways we think that we can offer non-traditional apprenticeships and really push apprenticeships regardless of the IRAP EO. Oh, it looks like we have some founding members of the coalition on the call, or a founding member. Welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Again, we will be sharing information, sharing the policy priorities in more detail, sharing information about how we arrived to those recommendations and what we hope to do about them. And I know many of you who are on this call. Please reach out if you've got questions. Join a listening session. And we're excited to have an opportunity to really move Ohio forward in some of these areas. And I'd love to have more people, and I'm sure our leadership committee would love to have more people along for the ride. Leadership folks who are on the call, is there anything you want to share before we wrap up? Okay.
Rebecca, this is Lori Atkins, and I just want to thank everybody for being on the call today, and just wanted to say also that if there are some things that regarding, we talked about workforce and WIOA and the training, and one of the things that I think is something that can be used as some tweaking that's WIOA related is WIOA as it relates to workforce development and adult education and having a stronger connection together. So in those areas, we are really looking for innovative ways to address this, and then also anybody that's really interested in that to reach out to us too, because workforce is about upskilling as much as it is advancing, and in many cases the upskilling, it needs to be coordinated with some type of brush up in literacy and numeracy. So just wanted to put that out there too, if there is interest, to make us aware of that.
Thank you, Lori. And there's one more thing I do want to say, and it's a glaring omission that I haven't raised this earlier, but the coalition did, the leadership committee of the coalition did decide late in 2019 to really integrate a racial equity lens throughout all of our work. And we didn't talk about that much today. We are going to be having some race equity focused webinars in the next few months, but we do think it's an important issue that we have to tackle, that it's particularly critical from a workforce and talent perspective to mitigate disparities in employment outcomes and earnings. And you'll see that again in the narrative. All right. Well, again, thank you for your time today. New faces, old faces, appreciate it, and look forward to continuing to engage with you all. Thank you very much.